Asking for It, a Novel Approach. Episode 20, Chapter 80. The shallow blue box of water remains undisturbed in the courtyard below. The dozen units flanking it all have an abandoned look about them. The corresponding 12 units above are equally lifeless. Michaela steps out of one and leans onto the wrought iron railing over the pool. Her head is light and she feels a surplus of energy. She thinks about the little coffee shop not far up Sunset Boulevard from their corner at Tamarind. But she doesn't need the caffeine and decides against it. She's wearing her trainers, some fancy orange flannel shorts, and a Dolphins football jersey. Her bra isn't the best for running, but she doesn't want to wake up the edge going back in to change it. She sets out to find the big cemetery they noticed when locating this apartment. Thin yellow bars of light angle across the wall across the little bedroom's window. The edge adjusts the shutters to bring in more light. Michaela is up, but the place is quiet, save for the city's droning outside. She's not in the little sitting room beyond the kitchenette either. Standing in the room's center, he works his shoulders around in circles, forwards, then in reverse, loosening muscles he feels aching between his shoulder blades. When they finally made it back to the city last night, he'd slept fitfully in the bed next to Michaela. She'd made the decision. With some irritation, she forbade him to take the couch. The night at the producer's place in the hills had been bad enough. He didn't want to test her patience further. "At least give me something to spoon on," she'd muttered before drifting off, snoring like a trooper for half-hour intervals, interrupted by near-waking episodes during which she was all knees and elbows. Had she taken the inside of the spoon, would things have gone differently? He couldn't reckon now whether she'd been calculating at that bitter end of the night. She was definitely still flying, albeit lower and slower. Back in the bedroom, still yawning mightily, he surveys the floor to locate his sweats. He scoops up keys and wallet from the unattractive wooden cube with drawers that serves as a bedside table. Coffee being her morning imperative, Michaela probably headed up that little place out on Sunset. Michaela is approaching the Hollywood Forever cemetery at a relaxed lope when she notices the guy with no head across the street. He's waving frantically in her direction. In place of a head, he has a huge camera, its massive lens forming a single onyx black cyclops eye. When she looks over again, the guy's taken his camera under his arm, football running back style, and is attempting to pace her. He is so unlikely to succeed at that, Michaela simply shoots him a jaunty FU finger and banks in through the gated entrance to the cemetery. She's always liked cemeteries for running. No traffic, well-tended lanes and lawns. This one turns out to be a celebrity cemetery. Hollywood Forever, hello. There are strangely barren precincts, nothing but close-cropped, sun-punished grass, and there are several large buildings, austere yet promising cheesy displays within. She doesn't slow down to investigate. Soon she comes to areas filled with the headstones. She keeps her stride modest, compensating with energetic bursts of stutter steps, lunges, and shadow boxing that are her routine. After half an hour circling the place like this, she's worked up a sweat and exits the same gates she entered. Camera guy is leaning against a little half wall there. He's stowed his equipment in a shoulder bag. With a conciliatory grin, and showing her both palms in a gesture of innocence, he asks her for a minute. She has to wait out some traffic to cross onto Tamarind anyway. The guy wears clean chinos, a black short-sleeved shirt with collar, and more importantly, He's beaming an inoffensive grin. Michaela jogs on the spot while he explains what he wants. Does she have an agent? Is she an actress? He's a location scout, actually, but he really wants to get into casting. He can show her images to someone with whom she should be impressed, she gathers. He doesn't want to bug her. Will she just maybe take his card? Maybe call if she thinks... The light changes and Michaela takes the card and waves goodbye with it as she forges across the street and sets off back up Tamarind. In the window seats at Purple Coffee, out on Sunset Boulevard, the Edge is in reluctant conversation with a young woman. To look at, she's maybe not out of her teens. Wispy white dreadlocks frame dark brows and playful eyes. Her bright white wife-beater reveals slender arms, olive skin slathered in lurid tattoos. Jungle cats leap over variously contorted fetish dolls with X's for their eyes. There are anime and cartoon characters the Edge cannot place. Her jeans are less than impeccable. There are even what appear to be hasty notes scrawled on the faded thighs in blue ballpoint pen. Her name is Mina Weingarten, and she recognizes him. She can't say from where yet, but she is determined. Why is she determined? The Edge has insisted her investigations could be more profitably directed elsewhere. In response, she explains her career plans in documentary film and states meaningfully that she only reads nonfiction. Basically, I'm a bloodhound, mister. You might as well give it up. The Edge raises his hands, deadpan. I give up. Right. Well, totally sorry, but I've got to get you into focus here. I know I'm an annoying little punk, but sorry again, nobody comes to Purple Coffee with life-threatening business on their mind. So I'm going to go ahead and assume it's okay. I'm not going to trigger some calamity in your busy business day, life, whatever. And so you can humor me then, right? The Edge is smiling thinly, just vaguely nodding towards his diminutive interlocutor, while scanning the street outside for signs of Michaela. I know you're in showbiz. I've got celebrity radar. My folks are in film up past their necks. Let's see, maybe an actor, maybe not. You're pretty, but pretty short too, which I can say, 'cause I'm like a midget myself. Besides, you're trying so hard to be humble here, it's making you frown. The Edge's eyebrows have gone up on more than one occasion during the girl's rap. They actually begin to ache with all the stretching during Mina Weingarten's next gambit. So, investigative journalism. I don't know all the rules yet, but I'm thinking if you can't brush me off completely, like dandruff or the homeless dude with the obvious aerosol habit on the corner over there, then you must have a big heart in you. And you could just, why not? Make this brat's day and just give up your story. There's the very briefest hitches in her verbal stride. Help a sister out here. Give it up so I can make sense of the synchronicity. I can feel when I'm in the right place at the right time, right? I know you're someone I should know, and there's probably a lot of synergy here too. You don't want me trying to figure out the synergy too, do you? I'm feeling it here. You know what I'm talking about. It ain't sex stuff. You don't gotta worry about that, but I've worked my magic on a lot of guys before now, so I know when I'm onto something. A story, right? The Edge is running out of quiescent uh-huhs and okays. When large as all life itself, Michaela strides into the frame. She stops before the picture window and presses her nose onto the glass directly between them. Little Mina Weingarten breaks off her harangue, pauses, then claps like an excited child. She leans forward to examine Michaela's eyes up close. They float there like a pair of exotic fish inside the glass of an aquarium. The fish dart away, Michaela stands back from the window and moves to the cafe's entrance. "This man has a story he refuses to tell." Michaela takes the measure of this tiny tot, earthy punk princess with the buttery good looks. "Oh, I know his story. Don't I, Archie?" "I knew it. I'll buy you a coffee to spill. The story, I mean. Spill the story. I maybe could spring for a pretzel even. You like pretzels? You this rock star's lady friend?" When coffee and pretzel have been acquired, Michaela begins divulging Archie's claim to fame. As she begins doing so, the Edge panics just a little, in a manly manner neither woman seems to note. Thankfully, it turns out Mina has no prior knowledge after all. The mixed magical arts that Michaela refers to don't elicit so much as a suspicious look. "Okay, so I was a little off. Bit of a story there, maybe, but no. What about you, lady? What's your story? I need to make a film here." The Edge beats a hasty retreat homeward, hugely relieved at the lack of interest in Archie's story. Michaela remains to eat her pretzel. When she makes it back to their rental, she finds the Edge still a little jumpy, not really himself. She evades his casual inquiry just long enough to bother him. "Oh yeah, sure, I did. I gave Miss Mina all the gory details. The designer cupcake business, the rabid alligator incident, trophy fishing tarpon in the Keys, the whole shooting match. She just wasn't interested. Go figure." She responds to the Edge's obvious relief with a disdaining smirk, pulls out her cell and rummages in her purse for the photographer's business card. "Hi," she checks the card again. "Rick. Yeah, Rick. About what you were proposing at the cemetery." The Edge's brow furrows, but he does not look over. "Okay, so the long plan involves what? Film work? I'd be doing auditions or something?" "Uh-huh. And how does that work?" Chapter 81. Jimmy has made their introduction and scuttled off again, a beer in either hand. Dirk Bergstrom glances at the hand that's resting on his 961's instrument cluster. 3 rings. One in particular holds his attention. A signet ring. That's what you call them. It's deeply etched gold, deeply enough that the effect is almost more black than gold, where a wreath of thorns and squarish rosebuds frame the initials. The initials, J.A., in script, lie in an inlaid oval of burnished silver. Lance waits for the man to meet his eye. He's perhaps 65, a still solidly built 65, with a deeply lined bronze complexion and slightly evasive slate-gray eyes. His handshake was over-firm, and he's apparently not in any hurry to look up from the bike. "So, I feel a little self-conscious even asking about the bike. I've never even seen... What's the J.A. stand for, Lance?" The man nods towards his hand. Lance lifts it a few inches and spreads his fingers before he can actually focus on the ring in question. The man must have excellent eyesight. He has the uncomfortable sensation his hand might begin to shake. It passes. "Jensen Abjarty, my father." "Ah, passed, has he?" "Yes, when I was just out of my teens, actually." Hard. "So, you know what this bike's worth?" "Honestly, I don't. I've never even seen one like it before. So, kinda rare, I guess?" "You see yourself riding it? Or more of a collection piece?" "Well, my father rode Nortons, but my teens, in the late 70s, by then they were pretty spendy. I settled for a Honda, half the size. Haven't ridden since that way back when. Too much fun. Figured I'd hurt myself sooner or later. Short answer? Long overdue. I'd want to ride it." Dirk Bergstrom gives a brief but hearty laugh at that. What are you, 50, Lance? Finally time to have some fun? You're good with ages. I'm not a sentimental man. I'd sell the bike. 20 grand. That's 3 or 4 more than you'd pay for it if you had lots of time and looked hard enough. You might find another one. But I'm guessing you probably don't and won't. Bergstrom throws a leg over the bike, flicks at something under the tank, turns the ignition key, opens the choke, and presses the starter, all in one smooth and practiced motion. The engine comes to life and groans loudly at a steady 3,000 RPM. Bergstrom flicks the choke shut again, and the big mutter pa-punt, pa-punt, pa-punts crisply at an idle. He gives Lance the, "So? What do you think?" look. Lance smiles as he rakes the bike's profile with another look of steadily growing admiration. "If you're serious, I'll show you her ins and outs. First you'll show me you can still ride. On a lesser bike, of course. Jimmy tells me you drove up from Miami. You're lucky. I'm in Fort Myers. I'll be trailering her right by your doorstep." Lance takes no offense at the man's presumptions regarding the potential sale. He was likely obliged to listen through Jimmy's pop psychology on the subject. He accepts Bergstrom's NOC card and agrees to call in 2 days' time. "I'm not a sentimental man," he'd said. Either he's a pretty cagey salesman, or the guy meant something by that. There seems to be a consensus that he needs a bike. For emotional reasons? Most people would just assume automotive fetish, or perhaps midlife crisis. Chapter 82. 2 days after arranging the bike's purchase, Lance makes the trip to Dirk Bergstrom's place in the countryside near Fort Myers. He rolls out of the long gravel driveway on a smaller, less powerful, and much less valuable motorcycle. Bergstrom follows him on the big Norton. It's easily 30 years since Lance has ridden, but it comes back to him in a flood. In high school, more affluent friends got their first cars. Lance got himself a third-hand, hopped-up 350 Honda. His father had barely suppressed a sneer when he brought it home. It mattered not a bit to Lance. He rode the bike like a knight astride his charger. He rode it out of high school and into university. He rode it sliding and spitting cinders around his old high school's track on a weed and tequila-inspired midnight dare. Escaping apprehension on this occasion convinced him that he had something of the wild one in him. Dropping the bike and sliding across 2 lanes of highway at 70 miles per hour convinced him he could likely find safer ways to express his wild side. He'd sold the scuffed-up bike for hitchhiking money and made his escape to California. They take it pretty easy, cruising back roads for half an hour before, convinced of Lance's ability to ride, Bergstrom pulls over and offers him his first turn aboard the bigger bike. The bank draft for $20,000 is already cleared, after all. The sensation is strong. The Norton's raw power commingles with something Lance can only liken to grace. It's a reverent first ride. The next day, the guy at the DMV smiles knowingly when told about Lance's latest automotive requirements. The owner at the bike dealership in Hialeah deals with him personally, selling him the best Dayanese one-piece he has in stock. Kangaroo skin, carbon fiber armor, the whole MotoGP deal. When Lance throws down cash for everything, suit, boots, gloves, a full-face AGV helmet, as well as a little carbon fiber turtle shell job, the guy even instructs an employee to drive Lance out to Bergstrom's place so he can pick up the bike without the hassle of trailering it. Lance listens attentively to the suddenly wistful ex-owner's parting tidbits of advice and admonition. This time, where Bergstrom's driveway meets the pavement, Lance drops the clutch, shifting into second gear, and opens the throttle wide. Lofting the front wheel modestly, he burns through the next gears without looking back. Chapter 83. Lance dreams that the Edge hands him his very own hangman's noose. It has his name on it. With the coarse fibers of the heavy hemp rope rasping at his throat, Lance utters the word discipline, and the Edge disappears. The rope is back in his hand, and its general utility demands something more of him. He flings the noose up into the air. He flings it again, and he flings it higher. On the 5th, maybe 600th fling, it snags on a limb high up in an ancient oak tree. He climbs the rope, hand over hand like some Navy SEAL on a mission. When he can no longer see the ground below, he is somehow no closer to the top. He understands determination has betrayed him. Individual strands in the rope begin writhing around, separating and challenging his grip. These strands have their own names and voices now. They sing out advice and argument as the rope slips through Lance's fingers. For days now he's been waking pre-dawn, sick at heart and a little nauseous. He's plagued by brutal images, forced filleting, limbless bodies, burials and excrement. He waits them out, desperate for sleep to smother the waking nightmare again. Nearing abject dependency, touring the SM porn fair online, he's been reckless. Wrapped and masturbating, he's been dousing his subconscious in something truly corrosive. This is the sort of revelation that gets people preachy. If he hadn't come of age in the permissive 70s, he might get a little evangelical himself about it. But today, Lance just wakes with a sense of growing fortitude. For the next 2 days, he does little but sleep, eat, and ride his new bike. He's moving in a new direction. He's put several clients of his in the care of his protege, Jenna, freeing himself up. For what? He's still not saying for sure. It seems patently unreasonable, but he suspects Olivia Craint has actually cured him of something. She's some kind of well-shod urban shaman? Absurd. But he had had those moments, just before going to see her, afraid that he'd end up a puddle of dissociated personality traits on the floor. They'd have needed a pitchfork to scoop up his remains. Chapter 84. It's not yet properly morning, and Lance is already taking a breather at roadside, way out in the country. To arrive at this quiet hour, he set out from Miami in the middle of the night. He rode the big bike out of his underground parking like ripping open a Christmas present at age 4. Out in the open air, the quiet streets lamplit just for him, all was well in the world. The speed on the freeway quickened his blood a bit. Coffee at the last gas stop before the Indian River exits thinned that blood out still more. The empty roads inland through the mangroves led him back to a place he'd discovered while scrambling around these byways, trying to find alternate routes into Michaela's place on the edge of Fort Pierce. Having piloted his Panamera through this particular series of 8 corners for the very first time, Lance immediately pinned his GPS map with the location. Corners tight and corners banked, climbing or declining slightly, they all flowed together, connecting in ways that promoted rapid transitions. Once before now, he'd returned for the sheer pleasure of racing through them, the Porsche's suspension set stiff, traction control tuned to match. Lance is parked now before a sizable fig tree, whose broad canopy of dark green leaves must give good cover in the heat of day. As dawn approaches, the tree is a dark agent of entropy, quietly completing its gradual consumption of a sizable cabbage palm. Lance has heard of, but never seen the botanical oddity for himself. Fascinated, he leans in close to spy, through a split in the fig's trunk, the signature cross-hatched skin of the palm. The strangler fig provokes troubling thoughts as Lance stares into the black maw of its aerial roots. He tries to picture the amiable palm tree standing unmolested there in full sunlight several years before. Lance leaves the fig to its palm and dismisses the troubling associations they've provoked. It's almost dawn. He peers up the road to the first bend. Behind the treetops' filigree, the sky is brightening. The road ahead remains obscure, but looking intently, Lance can already make out more detail in the coarse stone and seashell bitumen at his feet. Before long, there'll be more people up and out on these roads. Strapping his helmet back on, Lance starts his bike, drops it into gear, and rides slowly up toward the first bend. He takes close note of his lane's outside margin, crumbling but nowhere eating into the lane's full width. He picks up a modest head of steam before going round the easy left-hander. Having worked his way studiously through the mile of twisting riverside road, Lance turns back, now only interested in points where the corner's contours might tempt an oncoming driver to cross the road's barely visible center line. It's noticeably lighter already, though he's yet to encounter another motorist. Back at the big strangler fig, he loops around to his starting point. With the engine warm and idling between his knees, he pauses, taking final stock of himself. Inside the armored envelope of his leathers, he can feel a nascent trickle of sweat tickling the hollow at the base of his throat, and another descending to the cleft in his butt cheeks. He fusses, adjusting his little shell of a helmet back slightly from his brow. He smiles grimly at the superficial protections that this thing would provide him if it came to that. He's not consciously intending to test the resilience of his skull under massive trauma. He's not wearing it for fashion's sake either, though the shallow scallop of a helmet does lend his silhouette a pretty butch symmetry. His suit's armor bulks him up a bit, but the big bulb of a full-face helmet always seems like overkill. It ruins the profile, that's for sure. Aesthetics aside, he just doesn't want to experience his imminent challenge from within the high-tech, cushioned and quiet confines of a full-face helmet. He needs the engine's roar, the air slapping his eyelids around. Lance has never considered suicide. He has an enduring, unqualified love for his life. He's hopeful that the sensations awaiting him will rival those of his first 50 years. Dropping the big Norton back into gear, he grabs as big a handful of throttle as he dares, launching the bike toward corner 1. The pinkish hue of the pavement is coming out in the gathering daylight. It's the type of surface that'll grate you to the bone if you go down without leathers. Accelerating out of the first corner, he flicks the bike back to perpendicular, fixes his sights on the upcoming hard right-hander. Banking into that right-hander, he backs off the gas, then screws it on again just at the apex. There's a pleasing correlation of his racing heart and the roaring pulse of the big twin's cylinders. The little straights separating some of the corners all but disappear at this speed. He clicks up a gear, gives a little stab of throttle, and is immediately knocking it back down to second and braking hard to enter the next bend. Braking, he loads the front forks so hard the rear wheel wants to come up, so hard that his wrists and forearms are challenged, resisting his own forward momentum. The ride becomes equal parts lover's quarrel and physics equation. The bargain is requiring some split-second timing and his nuanced appreciation of the bike's relationship, not only with himself, but with the unfurling skein of roadway beneath them. Nature herself is playing the fickle mistress. The physics of his passage cannot go unattended. Engine braking, the sum total of frictions between all internal parts, drag at the bike's momentum when he rolls off the throttle. It plays a subtle but continuous accompaniment to the braking he does manually. The big Brembos bite hard with very little effort on the rider's part. But then there's the corresponding phenomenon of momentum in the big Norton's racing heart. Once he's promised this bike some speed, it is not eager to relinquish it. 2 bits of rubber, each roughly the size of a credit card, represent the bike's only contact with the road at any given moment. Not much to rely on, stopping a 600-pound projectile. Likewise, too much gas too soon exiting a corner, and the traction maintained going through that corner can vanish. Even back in his regular riding days, Lance never achieved that oneness with the bike that allows you to ride without thinking. He's always assumed the really good riders ride unselfconsciously. It's important to apprehend the entire experience. Not apprehend, but live it. Without too many conscious assessments. Definitely without second guesses. Suddenly, Lance is going very wide, approaching the middle of a demanding left-hand sweeper. He's gone in too hot, hasn't scrubbed off enough speed, and now it's catching up with him. He can't look up, but he doesn't need to. He can sense the rapid approach of foliage, can almost hear it whistling past. He's misjudged something. Maybe the camber changing, pavement tilting slightly out from the corner. A wasting radius means the corner is tightening as a rider passes through it. Lance can account for none of this now. He feels the bike's stability compromised, feels it as he drifts out of the corner, tires kicking up debris where the pavement degrades on the verge. Too late to brake. Already leaned in as far as he dares, he can only hang on white-knuckled, hoping to ride it out. Or he's shot through. Just. He didn't bail, and will later congratulate himself on it. Immediately, he's staring at the next bank of vegetation, rushing up to meet him. By sheer luck, he's perfectly set up for this last corner, and takes it like a champ. Leaned over hard, knee almost on the pavement. Free and clear of the twisting corners, he drops his hands from the bars, heaves a huge breath, and grins like a fool as he coasts out into the sun-teased open landscape. Adrenaline has been coursing through him all during his little test. Now he savors his heart's pounding. His hands shake a bit as he retakes the grips. Resting up at roadside once more, Lance is still elated. He pulls out his cell just to stare at Michaela's contact. He tries hard to resist drawing conclusions from what he's just done. Obviously, there's been more to it than good, clean automotive fun. In the half-light of approaching dawn, a test of his mettle awaited. On the surface, that's all it was. But he's also run a different risk. With the sun up off the horizon and bathing his grinning face, Lance is reminded bodily of what love means. The brute, mechanical forces at play in riding a motorcycle can be better than sex. But today, perhaps, it was all about love. How and if love would keep him on the road. He's still staring at his contact list. All that's dear to you creates a basis for your physical thriving on earth. The unmistakable joy of desire finding its true mark, that is love. It's not satisfaction of that desire, much less any reciprocation. Love proceeds from an awareness that you've connected with what life has cooked up for you. It affirms your being. If asked, you're doing fantastic. Whatever burden you do bear, it's weightless. You thrive.